In a strange way, it wasn't. It wasn't a choice. It was just the way that the universe worked its way into bringing me into women's football. When I was in Australia, I was coaching in boys' youth development, and I got to a stage in 2011, where I felt that to progress further as a coach, I needed to move to Europe to really be part of that. You know, Europe is the center of the football world. So I moved to Germany and tried to find a position in many different clubs, men's, women's, boys, girls. And it just so happened that FFC Frankfurt was the place that gave me a chance, which was a women's football club, very, very famous, very successful women's football club in Germany. So I was very lucky that they gave me a chance to be a video analyst with their first team, and it just started from there. It wasn't a targeted approach that I wanted to work in women's football. It was more about working in European football and learning more about the game at a higher level. So once I started to work for Frankfurt, as the years went by, I slowly rose up through the teams and then became the head coach of the first team. And yeah, it's just been a natural progression. Somewhere I feel comfortable in women's football. I can work at a good level, but it's something that's, it's not. In the old days, it was very much you're a men's coach, you're a women's coach, but you see these days that the line is not quite there anymore, and coaches will just see it as football. So I just see it as football, and at the moment I'm in women's football. But it's football's so unpredictable; it can go either way. So I would never say that I wouldn't go back to men's football or anything. So that wasn't a choice. It was just the way it worked out.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, very warm welcome to the VAR Show. The show is talks about all the major football league details. Today we have the assistant coach of Korea Women's National Football Team, Mr. Matt Ross, with us. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank Matt for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation. It's a very unique and special opportunity for me to speak with you and to share some of my work so far. But I'm doing very well these days. Korea's handled the COVID situation quite well, and football life is back to normal almost. So at the moment we're quite busy. The WK League, which is the women's league here, has been underway for about 10 matches. So we're quite busy to travel to the matches each Monday night, and we watch. We scout the players, and we're always looking for new players that can join our national team squad. So we've been busy, but also planning for the next step in the national team, which is our Olympic qualification against China next February, which has been pushed back, unfortunately, since the coronavirus outbreak. So I've also been learning Korean. I think it's important to learn the language and the culture. So relaxed, but also many things to do. So it's been quite a a unique time with the way that the world is at the moment.
Definitely, and so you are currently the assistant coach of South Korea national team, and how is the place in general? Like, I have never been there. How is it?
It's a beautiful country. I'm a little bit biased because my wife is Korean, so I've been here many times before, but we've been married for 13 years. So my connection with Korea is long. So I also have family here. My in-laws are here. So it's a very friendly, very open, very westernized modern country, but it's also kept its very traditional roots. The people are very kind, very disciplined, very hardworking, which also flows into the way that the football is played. Players work very hard. The culture, the food, it's a very unique place. People that haven't been, or you just look at the map and you think, oh, it's just a little piece of the world off China next to Japan, but it's very unique. That it's due to its history, it's broken away from the Japanese, and it's had a long history with the Chinese. So it's fought very hard for its little place on the earth, and it's very protective of its culture and its people. So it's but that said, it's got all the modern life and technology that you could ever hope for, and it's a pleasure to live here, and I felt at home since the first day I arrived. So beautiful country, and you'll have to come and visit at some stage.
Hopefully that is soon rather than later. And I'll touch on your career. You have been involved in women's game, be it with club or with country, for quite a while. But why did you choose to get involved in women's game? Because that's not something that is I mean, it's in the infancy in most places all around the world. So in your opinion, why did you choose, or what pulled you towards the women's game?
In a strange way, it wasn't a choice. It was just the way that the universe worked its way into bringing me into women's football. When I was in Australia, I was coaching in boys' youth development, and I got to a stage in 2011, where I felt that to progress further as a coach, I needed to move to Europe to really be part of that. Europe is the center of the football world. So I moved to Germany and tried to find a position in many different clubs, men's, women's, boys, girls, and it just so happened that FFC Frankfurt was the place that gave me a chance, which was a women's football club, very very famous, very successful women's football club in Germany. So I was very lucky that they gave me a chance to be a video analyst with their first team, and it just started from there. It wasn't a targeted approach that I wanted to work in women's football. It was more about working in European football and learning more about the game at a higher level. So once I started to work for Frankfurt, as the years went by, I slowly rose up through the teams and then became the head coach of the first team. It's just been a natural progression. Somewhere I feel comfortable in women's football. I can work at a good level, but it's something that's it's not. In the old days, it was very much you're a men's coach, you're a women's coach, but you see these days that the line is not quite there anymore, and coaches will just see it as football. So I just see it as football, and at the moment I'm in women's football, but it's football's so unpredictable, it can go either way. So I would never say that I wouldn't go back to men's football or anything. So that wasn't a choice. It was just the way it worked out.
Definitely. And in terms of men's football, there's a huge gulf in class between maybe Europe and Asia, at least as of now, and in general, not some countries maybe in par, but not all. And how is it in terms of women's? Because you have managed, like you said, in Frankfurt, where you played maybe the Champions League, and here you are playing with the national team. How is the gulf in class between the two sets of team?
Really, it's not big, in the sense that it's more. My opinion is it's more the level of self-confidence and the psychology of the players. There's many players, for example, playing in the Korean league here, that could easily play in Europe. So At the moment, we have players that playing in Chelsea, playing at West Ham, playing in Brighton, Bristol City, and these players are the success stories from Korea that have made the move to Europe. But there's no reason in terms of technique, in terms of their ability to play football at that level, there is no real gulf. It's more to do with, I would say psychologically, that belief that I can go to Europe, I could play for Frankfurt or Wolfsburg. I think it's more their perception that they see themselves as inferior, whereas the reality is they're just as good. I've worked with the players in Korea that we're working with now are at the same level as the girls that play for Germany, for England, for France. It's now getting them to believe that they're good enough and to show that on the pitch against these top teams that, hey, I'm as good as you. I'm going to not just compete with you, but I'm going to beat you. I'm going to be better than you. So definitely Asian football, women's football is the Japanese have always been strong. The Chinese have always been strong. So I think that golf, it's not a golf. It's maybe just a small step down, but the gap is getting smaller every year as the players get fitter and more tactically intelligent. So there's no reason why Asian female players can't think of themselves as on a par with European female players.
Definitely. And you were with Frankfurt when you moved to China to take I think the under 15s. So how did that happen?
Well, between Frankfurt and China was 1 year in Sweden, which was a great year for me personally, and in terms of learning and developing as a coach. And it was a very strange. It was through LinkedIn that someone at the CFA had connected with me and basically asked very directly, do you want to come to China and coach our under 15s? They had an initiative at that time to bring in European experienced women's coaches to take the youth teams sort of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and really they targeted women's football as an area to have national success. The men's team in China has always had various issues and never quite fulfilled its potential, but they had big success in women's football back in the late 90s, 1999 and around that era, and they wanted to recreate that. So they had an idea to let's target some coaches in Europe and work with our youth players over medium term, so 2 to 5 years, and really develop that next generation of female players. So it was very simple. It was just a message from a contact in LinkedIn, said, would you like to come and work in China? We talked more and got some more details, but it was still very, let's say, in its preliminary stage. We hadn't really fixed on many details, but my interest was there. At the time, my wife was working in China and I'd lived there for 2 years previously, so it was something that I was open to. And then as we talked more, there was former Dutch national women's team coach had taken the under-16s, former Atletico coach in Spain had taken the under-14s, so I could see that this was sort of taking shape. And I talked to Sun Wen. She was the head of women's football at the CFA, who's a very famous player. And she convinced me. She said, this is a really good project. Your skills are really what we need. And I agreed. And within I would say 7 days, I landed in China and basically arrived midnight on a Sunday night and was on the training pitch the next morning at 10 o'clock. So it was just a really quick move, but it was a really fantastic experience. Yeah.
Definitely. And talking of Korea, and You said like there's not much difference between maybe European women's game and maybe Korean or Asian in general. But how, if you compare like maybe Korea in terms of men's football in the world stage, and if you compare women's football of Korea in world stage, what is the difference in class between them?
Between the men and women in Korea?
Yeah.
You mean as a national team or as a
national
league?
As in like overall football in general, you can speak on the national team as well as the league.
Between the men and the women. I think the men have had a longer history of say exporting players to Europe, and you saw like the success of Husky Hiddink when he was in charge of the national team. So I think they have a bit of a longer connection with Europe. So the players have had exposure to, I guess, the very elite, the very top of the elite game, and that's flowed through the K League and through their national teams and youth national teams. For the women, I can say that say Colin Bell now and myself coming into the women's national team, this is the first European coaching perspective the players would have had. So it's different. It's not to say that it's better or worse. It's just a different way to approach football and coaching. So, in terms of the league, the difference here is that, say, the K League and the WK League is two separate entities. So, in other countries, for example, in Germany, the Bundesliga, the top men's clubs have a women's department. So Wolfsburg, Bayern Munich, now Eintracht Frankfurt. So there's a close connection. Coaches, staff, methodology, all these things can sort of pass between the men's and women's departments. But in Korea at the moment, the WK League clubs are standalone. So the team in Incheon or Seoul, there's not a great flow of information about tactics or training methodology. So it's just different. And I think we've seen other countries now, like England, France, Spain, this connection between the men's clubs now having women's departments and actually funding them and being interested in their development. I think this is the way forward. So I think for the Korean WK League and the national team to make the next step, I think we have to lift the whole level, the league, the national team. It's possible. It's just if they're open to this kind of concept.
Definitely, and like I'll touch on a topic that you mentioned, like how you and about Colin Bell is the head coach of South Korea's women's national team. And this is again my opinion alone. In my opinion, the head coach in a women's game should be given to a female candidate. What is your opinion?
My opinion is the best candidate should get the job. So I think it's very simplistic just to look at the sex or the gender. I know it's an interesting topic these days. I mean, for example, I worked with China U15, and she's a Asian Female Coach of the Year in Hong Kong. She won the Hong Kong League as a female coach in the men's league, and I've seen how good a coach she is. And I wouldn't like to say, well, she's a female, she should only work in women's football. Same as, there's more cases around the world of female coaches having success in men's football, male coaches having success in women's football, and I think any option is good. My feeling is it's too simple just to say a female team needs a female coach. I think, of course, you look at each coach on their merits and their ability to do the job. If if there is a female coach in South Korea that's the best for the job, then they should have it. It's yeah, that's my opinion on that one. but I'm also interested in as to your reason why the female team should have a female coach.
Definitely. The reason, from the point of place where I come from, is basically, see, like, you don't have, like you said, the person who is fit enough for the job should get it. That is absolutely fine. But like, even like you said, like, the coach who won the Hong Kong League, she will not be considered for many of the men's team. That it's an exception that she got considered maybe for that team. But you can count how many women's team are, a women's manager or coach are managing a men's team. That is like extremely rare. Like, I think quite a while back, before I think Sari was appointed, Emma Hayes was floated around for the Chelsea job, but that really didn't take up. And it was like maybe just for the media just did it for fanfare maybe, or to sell their news, which was never an option for Chelsea to do. And although she's one of the most successful Chelsea managers in terms of football, in terms of women's football in the past maybe decade, and she does not even get considered maybe for a, if you take into consideration, she might not even get a job in League 2 of men's football, like, so that's like that. So I thought, like, if that is the case for women's football, and at least to maybe take out more managers from women's game, I think the job, at least the head coach job or one of the assistant coach maybe, should be kept for them, so that they can develop, or they will not have any place to develop. Like, you can have all the license and coaching and everything, but if you can't practice, you can at least vouch for this. If you can't practice, or you can't put in your skills, you'll never be a better coach.
Yes, that's a really good point. I know from my experience last year in China, I specifically had 2 female assistant coaches, and the plan was to mentor them with the view that they develop and take over. I think as a foreigner going into a place like China, that's the kind of legacy you have to leave, that you look to mentor, to develop. And I think it would be more damaging to put a female in a role that they're not ready for, that puts them in a difficult place to have success, and then certain people can turn around and say, oh, well, we gave it to a female and it didn't work. But if you have a plan in place, which we did have in China, to have 3 to 5 years to say, yes, you have the license, but now here's the experience. And I was quite comfortable to, let the assistants make important decisions and to put themselves in my shoes, that they would develop quite quickly. That if it's done the right way, then this is definitely, I think, the right way to go. But the Emma Hayes example is spot on. That I would be surprised if you say like a League 2 club would give her a chance. Yeah. It's a very...
That's just my opinion, and like, just the thing. Maybe even I'm doing it just to maybe sell my video. You get it? Like, if I would be the owner of a club, maybe I would be hesitant to maybe hire a women's coach. That's just the mentality, and I think people should change, or at least they should give them an option, fair option.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I think if you put yourself in the shoes of say like a football association or the chairman of a club, the very simple thing that you want is you want to win. So you don't have the time or the resources to take that gamble and say, well, we'll give it a go, and if we get relegated, it's at the end of the day, it's professional football, and it's about winning. So if you're a female coach that's got a record of winning and success, then I think you definitely should get a go. There should be no question about that. But I have an issue for anybody I know. When I was inexperienced as a coach, and you say to people when I was in Germany, just give me a chance, let me show you what I can do. They say, well, you've got it's that chicken and the egg of experience to show what you can do to then get more experience, and you really have to work hard and sacrifice to sort of get into that cycle that you can show somebody what you can do. And I think female coaches need the chance to learn and be mentored, and there's nothing stopping female coaches from getting to the top in men's or women's football.
Definitely. And like I wanted to touch a topic about Korea, and I do not know much about Korea, but what I have heard is there is a like in Nepal there is a hierarchy system where you always respect the elders. That is a very good thing, but you do not question them, which as a coach may be a very bad thing because you do not get feedback. So how is that thing?
It definitely exists. There is definitely a hierarchy between management, coaches, players, officials, support staff. You see that. As foreigners, we are conscious of, we're aware of it, and we work very hard to create an environment where we have to feedback. We don't want players to not ask questions. We don't want players to not give their opinion on any aspect of the way the team is going. So we do lots of video work with the players, and a lot of that is open-ended. So it's not the coach reviewing a match saying this is what you did wrong. It's small groups. What do you think? And we really don't let, for example, the younger players get off the hook and just be young and not talk because I shouldn't talk in this setting. No, your opinion is as valuable as everyone else's, regardless of age or where you are in this hierarchy. And so far, the players are really open to it, but it's definitely something that's part of their makeup. But we're trying to show the benefits of, yes, we respect everybody, but your opinion as an individual is as valid as the next person. So it's a work in progress, definitely, but it's something that I think modern football, we don't want robots, we don't want players that will just do whatever you say. And we also need to know how they feel, and when they're not comfortable or they don't understand it, they have to ask. So we're working towards that.
Definitely. And it's definitely because you can't just go and change. It's a very long culture that has been there, and it will be very difficult. And as a coach, what I have learned, at least from interacting with many coaches, is like you do not go to change, make wholesale changes. You go there to adapt and maybe improve the situation. I think so. If you can correct me if I'm wrong. And like, I wanted to ask you the similar thing. Like, you have been in a lot of countries, like you said, Germany, Sweden, China. How difficult is it for you, or what is the most challenging aspect, going there, going to a new place and adapting to the culture there?
I think you have to work very hard to appreciate and understand the culture that you're in, and work your. If I speak like 10 years ago, I had a very clear philosophy of what I thought football was and how it should be played. I don't have that anymore because I'm not Sarri, I'm not Mourinho. I can't go in and say this is how I do it and I need these kind of players, and it just doesn't. The reality doesn't work like that. So. And I think that, like you said, exactly right. You can't go in and just make wholesale changes. The most important thing I've learned is to actually shut up and listen. So I moved to Sweden. Again, you think because, well, Germany, Sweden, a lot of that culture is very similar, but there's so much of it that's so different. So I learned very early to to rely on the opinions of my assistant coach, my goalkeeper coach. We spend time, we drink coffee and just tell me about Sweden, tell me about Swedish players. What do they respond to? How do you get them motivated? Because they were so different to the German girls. And then, of course, China is completely different. So they were players that would do whatever you wanted in terms of football, and then do nothing else outside that. So take things very literally. And then you have to find ways to educate, but you also have to have in mind, what's the underlying culture? What's coming from the national culture? What's coming from the schools, the parents? What's the peers, the teachers? So it's and then you have to learn about all those layers, and then your football has to complement that on the top. And Korea's the same. Technically, the players are world class, but you also have to have the concept of, okay, women's football is still, maybe the parents aren't actively encouraging girls to become female footballers. That's a slow process, and the culture still has men at the top of the hierarchy. So again, you're getting players that you want to take on leadership roles and have leadership qualities in a culture where it's not actively encouraged. So it's very complicated. But if you go in just as a well, I'm here to coach football, you can miss all these important things, and you can make big mistakes very early on. So the biggest thing I've learned is to talk less, listen more, ask lots of questions to the right people at the right time, and to really understand the environment you're working in, and then build a philosophy that's going to work where you are. So again, the Chinese philosophy I had wouldn't work so well here as it wouldn't work in Sweden or Germany or Australia. So it's not easy, but for me that's part of the excitement and the joy to come to a new place and to sort of start with a blank slate and to build it up piece by piece.
Definitely. And you said you do not have a philosophy now, and that was my next question actually. What is your coaching philosophy like? Before you removed your coach, but whatever, I'll just reframe that question again. It's like, of course, you are very open to external stimulus of how you coach or what is your philosophy like, but you'll have an underlying way of how you see football or how you want your team to play football. So what is that? Like, on top of that, of course, you'll make the changes, whatever, according to the environment or whatever you are in, or the players available or whatever the external factor. But there is a thin line where you know that, okay, this is how I want to play. So what is that?
It's such a fluid thing. It changes. It's even changed this year. As coaches, we've studied teams like Wolverhampton, Leeds, Sheffield United, these teams that have come and they've done different things, underlapping centre-backs and back five, back three played in a different kind of way, and the way that football, the intensity of the teams such as Leeds or even Liverpool now, it's just amazing. So it's really made me reflect on what is my football philosophy and how do I want my team to play, and you distill it down to things like high intensity, the ability to press, teams that look forward. I think unless you're very lucky to have the players like Man City or teams like this that you can keep possession in such a way, I've gone away from that in the last year or two. I've seen lots of teams try and play from the back, from the goalkeeper, without having the technique to do so, and lose games. And I watch these teams and I think, well, okay, if your philosophy is to play from the back and keep possession, and you're losing, I said something's. I think that a good coach should be able to recognise that and say, okay, we have to change. This doesn't work for the players I have now. So a big part of my philosophy is also educating the players in training that they can come up with the solutions in the game. Modern football is just too fast, where we need intelligent players that can react to situations and have the solution already in their mind and act it out at such a high speed. So intelligent players playing at a high intensity, and now you can see also with, again, I use like Liverpool and Leeds as examples, that the physical and psychological demands now that players, you have to think, right, 15 kilometers, I'm going to have to run that today if I'm playing for this coach, and I'm going to have to be on my toes and just be ready to run. So that's where I am at the moment in terms of a football philosophy, that I want teams that want to look forward, that want to score goals, that know how to defend. And I think personally, the defensive side of the game has been neglected. I think a lot of coaching at academy level or even professional level is all about what will we do with the ball, and maybe the balance between, okay, what we work on in an attack has gone too far. And so I like this defensive stability and structure, and then when we have the ball, then to break at high intensity or to play and to look where the spaces are. And same again, 10 years ago I would have said I don't, my philosophy wouldn't include long balls, but you see the number of goals scored now with the centre back hitting a long ball into a fast striker and the ball goes in the net. So it's about giving the players the option. Okay, a short pass might be the right pass in this moment, but maybe the 60-yard ball into the corner for the winger, that's going to give us success. So it's always evolving, and I'm sure if we talk again in 5 years' time, the football philosophy would have changed again.
Definitely. And staying with that topic, and you said like you are very flexible with going into men's game or in women's game, and like I genuinely had this doubt, like suppose you have forged a good career in women's game right now, and in the men's game, how are you looked upon? Like what level would they consider you to be? Like suppose if I talk about Premier League, if you are going to apply, what level do you think they expect you to come and be? Because I don't know, I do not think like going in from women's game they will give you the head coach job, because like I think it's still not that way. So where do you see, like what do you think they consider the level of women's game generally?
It's a very good question. A good case would be Colin Bell, head coach here now, and his last position was the assistant coach at Huddersfield in the Championship. So he went from the Republic of Ireland women's team to an assistant in the Championship, and then again into a head coach of a women's national team. So that gives he's at a different stage of his career than me. He's 15, 20 years ahead with a far superior CV and experience and professional playing career. So it's not quite the same, but look, honestly, I would be, if I said I wanted to work in England and I said I wanted to work in men's football, I'd be competing to work in a youth team at an academy, be that Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, to be a under 16, under 15 head coach or under 19 assistant coach. That's realistically what I would say. Just to present my CV to a Premier League club, I think they say, oh, okay, we could maybe have a look at him at an academy team. That's very honestly, very, yeah, I would never think, oh, you can walk into a head coach job in men's football at the top professional level.
But then, why do you think it is that? Like, is it just a thinking of the general society, or what is it? Or is it that the level of women's game has not maybe evolved? Maybe because it's still new, very much new compared to men's game. Is it because of that?
I think there's still some very old traditional views of women's football, and if you watch the top of women's football, for example, the European Champions League, from say the quarterfinals on, the level is excellent. The level is world class. But the pool of players in women's football is obviously not as big as men's football. So you don't have to go very far to see that the quality does drop off. Whereas men's football, it can maintain its quality over more leagues, more divisions. But women's football, even to go from say in Germany, for example, the top of the Bundesliga to the bottom of the Bundesliga, it's quite a drop. You can get 5-0, 7-0, 8-2, these kind of results, which I think doesn't help the perception of women's football. Of course, it does happen in the Premier League that Norwich can lose by 5 or 6, or Manchester City can put 8 past somebody on the odd occasion. But in my opinion, this doesn't help the perception that women's football isn't at the level that it can be. And that also happens when it expands too quickly, that countries try to start a league and the player pool isn't at that professional level yet. Of course, you have to start somewhere, but yeah, there's lots of work to do to develop the women's game. But yeah, I go a little bit off topic, but I've seen countries like in Asia, say Vietnam, Bangladesh, Thailand. These countries are putting the investment into women's football, and they're starting to see the rewards. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, these kind of countries can develop their players with good coaching and good infrastructure, good funding, and yeah, women's football has a healthy future, I think.
Definitely. And like, I just wanted to touch on that topic. I have a follow-up question. Okay, and it's like you said, like when you analyze games, like maybe Liverpool, Sheffield, who play with new ideologies, or at least what's new, it's fresher than what's available. So, like when you analyze the tactics or whatever that is you analyze in the game, do you implement similar stuff, or do you take stuff from them, or is it possible to implement what they implement into women's game? Because the men's game has been there for quite a while, and it has evolved to this stage that they can implement that tactics. So women's game, is it possible to implement similar tactics at this stage, or do you maybe take inspiration and adjust according to what level you have?
Good question. It's again, it's more about perception. Like even, and it comes down to the education of the players. So a country like Germany, which I would say the level of player education in the youth stage is fantastic. So a player can develop in Germany, and by 15 or 16, boy or a girl, understand how to play with a back 4, a back 3, a back 5, with 3 in the midfield, 2 in the midfield, a diamond, 4-3-3, how to high press, how to do a low block, how to do a mid block. And as a coach, you can say, oh, well, Sheffield United played like this, and the players aren't overwhelmed by like a new name, or oh, today we're going to try a back 3, and I want you to try and underlap, which to some players can sound, well, very left field. What's the coach talking about? But then when you're on the training pitch and you say to the centre back who was in a back 4, now you're in a back 3, and in reality, you're maybe 5 meters away from where you were before. When you get the ball, and you try and break it down. So when you get the ball, if there's space in front of you, I want you to dribble. If the striker comes, you've got a wing back there. Before he was or she was a fullback, now we just say wing back. So really not much has changed, just a little bit of adjustment. If you play to the wing back and you can see space, or there's somebody's made a run in front of you, you can underlap. It's the same as an overlap, except it's an underlap. So if you've got players that are open-minded, and you can, for example, show a clip of something like that, and you just isolate that one player and say, okay, they've played that pass, there's that space, you move into that space. When that centre-back moves into that space, you're the other centre-back, you come across 10 metres and cover that space. So you try and break it down in a way that it's so simple that the player can just feel, okay, well, that fits with our general principles of play. We want width, we want depth, we want penetration through certain areas. And the players can see through over time that, well, this is not so new and outlandish. It fits with the way we want to play. It's just a slight adjustment to play with 2 strikers, 3 strikers, 1 striker, a false 9. It's all terminology, which I think coaches are also very guilty of trying to sound too clever. We try and have words and fancy ways to say very simple things. So that's what I've found very good with moving countries a lot is I just need basic language, because if I'm going to be speaking in Korean to a player, I can't get too complicated. I can't over elaborate with fancy words. So it has to be very simple, which hopefully then makes it simple for the players to understand. So to answer the question, women's football, there's no reason why you can't take the latest trends and developments from men's football. And of course you have to modify slightly. The players maybe aren't as fast, but that means that defenders aren't quite as fast. So the net effect is the same. There's no difference. So I think it's exciting for now women's football that the players are at a technical level that's much better than 10, 20 years ago, and tactically now becoming informed. And with now the professional nature of women's football, that players are fitter than they've ever been. We've got GPS, we've got data that can support, and recovery is great and facilities are great. So there's no reason why these trends now can't quickly and easily come into women's football.
Definitely. And now I'm coming to the end of the interview, and I have one last question for you. And you are so experienced in women's game, you have managed club, country in multiple continents. So do you have any piece of advice for a young coach coming up?
Yes. The biggest one I would have would be to have patience. To have patience, to appreciate the players you have in front of you today. Find a good mentor that you can learn from, listen to, and you can also reflect on your development. I think the patience, that was something that I struggled with. I was very impatient because in my opinion, I started very late to coaching. I was already in my 30s and had a long career as a teacher, and was really desperate to get in and to work as a coach. So I was always unsettled. I always wanted to progress faster, to win this league and get the next job, and to learn and get the next coaching license. And I was really impatient. But when I look back, I can see that it was better to go slowly. So I prefer now that it took, say, 10 years for me to get where I am now, or 12 years, because coaches that aren't patient that progress too quickly. There's a lot of cases of good coaches making mistakes when the stakes are too high. So when I was early days in my coaching, it was amateur leagues, it was lower leagues. I could make horrible decisions and nobody knew. It wasn't on TV, it wasn't in the papers, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter. And you could make an awful substitution or an awful tactical decision, lose the game, and you get the next week to think about it, to learn, to improve. So for a younger coach, focus on where you are and learn as much as you can, because you can learn more at those beginning stages of your career. Because you can try things. It becomes very hard to be coaching big games or internationals or professional games and try something you've never tried before. That's a gamble. But if you know you've tried something back when there was 20 people watching and your players would just do it because they didn't know any better, and you have to iron out all of these things in your philosophy and your methodology while you can, because it's difficult to do later on. Or it's more difficult to do later on. So I'd say patience is number one, and the same for players transitioning into coaching. You get to 30, 35, and okay, now I want to be a coach. And now you see in England, players want to take a League 2, League 1, and you see after a month or 10 games, they're fired and they think, well, coaching wasn't for me. But you need those 5-10 years of being a youth coach, working in an academy, taking amateur teams, lower league teams. That's where you really learn your trade, and then you've got all that experience now when you've got top quality players or better players, and you have the answers much faster. So that would be my biggest thing for young coaches.
So definitely, on that note, Matt, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors with the national team and whichever team, wherever you go in the future, whatever that is. And thank you once again for talking to me, and take care, stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.